The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room Catherine Cole had ever seen. Crystal walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, meeting at a dome that showed the stars beyond. Light from a distant sun streamed through the transparent ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the floor where representatives from 47 alien species had gathered. Catherine stood alone at the human delegation's podium. She was a tall woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a simple knot. Her dark blue uniform was plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the aliens around her. She looked small in this vast space, surrounded by beings who had traveled the stars for thousands of years before humans had even invented fire. But Catherine Cole was not afraid. She had been waiting for this day for a very long time. High Chancellor Voreth of the Kathrani Dominion rose from his elevated throne at the center of the chamber. He was an impressive creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales covering his entire body. For muscular arms extended from his broad shoulders, and his yellow eyes held nothing but contempt as he looked down at the human ambassador. "Humanity has been tolerated within this council," Barath announced. His voice was a harsh hiss that the translator device rendered into cold mechanical English. "We welcomed your primitive species into the galactic community. We shared our knowledge. We gave you access to the relay network that connects all civilized worlds." Catherine listened without expression. Around her, she could feel the hostility radiating from the assembled aliens. The Vosari delegation, tall and thin with pale blue skin, watched her with undisguised hatred. The Melthery squat creatures covered in thick brown fur growled softly among themselves. Even the usually neutral Erinthians, bird-like beings with beautiful feathered crests, seemed uncomfortable. "But your species has abused our generosity," Vorath continued, spreading all forearms wide. "You expand beyond your designated zones. You trade with sectors that have been forbidden. You harbor refugees from species that are under sanction. You develop weapons that violate our treaties." Catherine remained silent. Everything the High Chancellor said was true, technically. Humanity had broken many rules over the past 3 centuries. But those rules had been designed to keep humans weak, contained, and dependent on the Council's goodwill. "The Galactic Council has voted," Vorath declared, his voice rising with triumph. "By a margin of 41-6, we hereby declare a state of war against the Terran Federation." A rumble of approval echoed through the chamber. This was the moment many species had waited for. Humanity had grown too quickly, become too confident. It was time to remind them of their place in the galaxy. "You have 30 standard cycles to surrender your outer colonies and submit to occupation," Vorath continued. "Your fleet will be dismantled. Your shipyards will be destroyed. Your worlds will accept council governors to oversee your development. Resist, and you will face the combined military might of 41 species. The choice is yours." Vorath sat back on his throne, clearly expecting tears, pleas for mercy, or perhaps angry defiance from the human ambassador. What he did not expect was what actually happened. Catherine Cole looked up at the High Chancellor, and she smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a brave smile. It was the smile of someone who had just received very good news. "Finally," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent chamber. "We have been waiting for you to make this official." Vareth's yellow eyes narrowed. "You mock us, human." "Not at all, Chancellor." Catherine touched a small device on her wrist. "Earth's command. This is Ambassador Cole. Authorization code Prometheus 7, the Council has declared. We are now at Condition Red. I repeat, Condition Red." A moment of static, then a calm voice replied through her earpiece loud enough for nearby delegates to hear. "Confirmed, Ambassador. All units are moving to assigned positions. The President sends his regards and asks that you enjoy the show." The confusion spreading across Vareth's face was mirrored by dozens of other species throughout the chamber. This was wrong. Humans were supposed to be terrified. Their fleet was small, their technology inferior. They could not possibly be pleased about this declaration. "Counselors," Catherine said, addressing the entire assembly, "I strongly suggest you contact your homeworlds immediately. They are going to need to hear what happens next. "You're bluffing," Vorth snarled. "Your pathetic fleet cannot stand against even the Kathrani Dominion alone, let alone the combined forces of the Council." Catherine's smile never wavered. "Chancellor, do you know how humanity spent the last 300 years? While your species grew comfortable and lazy, secure in your ancient power, we worked. We planned. We built things that your sensors could never detect, in places your ships could never reach." She began walking slowly across the chamber floor, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "You look at humanity and see a young species, primitive, easily controlled. That is exactly what we wanted you to see. Every time your inspectors visited our worlds, we showed them obsolete factories and outdated ships. Every time your spies infiltrated our government, we fed them false information about our true capabilities." Catherine stopped in the center of the chamber and turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every delegation. "The truth is, we have been preparing for this war since the day we first met your kind. We knew that eventually the Council would try to destroy us. It is what powerful civilizations always do to rising ones. So we prepared, quietly, patiently, for 300 years. Vorth rose from his throne, his forehands clenched into fists. "You expect us to believe that humans have somehow built a military force capable of challenging the entire galaxy? Impossible. We have monitored your every move. You have monitored what we allowed you to monitor," Catherine replied. "Nothing more." A soft chime sounded from multiple devices around the chamber. Delegates began checking their communicators, and Catherine watched as expressions of confusion turned to shock, then fear. The Vosari ambassador was the first to speak, his translator rendering his words in a trembling voice. "The Third Fleet, our entire Third Fleet, has been disabled. Every ship. They report weapons they have never seen, vessels that appeared from nowhere." Similar reports began flooding in from other delegations. The Melthari Border Patrol had been surrounded by human ships that had somehow bypassed all their sensor nets. The Cathronia Advance Force near Arcturus had been destroyed in less than an hour by a single. Vorth stared at Catherine with new eyes. For the first time, there was something other than contempt in his expression. There was fear. "What have you done?" he whispered. Catherine Cole straightened her uniform and walked back toward the human delegation's podium. "We have done what humanity has always done, Chancellor. We have survived. We have adapted. We have overcome." She paused at the door of the chamber and looked back one final time. "You wanted a war with Earth. Congratulations, you have one. I suggest you spend the next 30 cycles not preparing to occupy our worlds, but figuring out how to defend your own." And with that, Ambassador Catherine Cole walked out of the Galactic Council chamber. Leaving chaos in her wake, the war had begun, and humanity was ready deep beneath the frozen surface of Europa. One of the moons of Jupiter, Admiral Daniel Hayes, stood in a command center that officially did not exist. The room was carved from solid ice and reinforced with metals that no Council scientist had ever analyzed. Screens covered every wall, showing real-time data from thousands of sources across the galaxy. Daniel was a big man with gray hair and a face. Weathered by decades of stress and responsibility, he had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment, training officers, designing battle strategies, and keeping the greatest secret in human history. "Admiral, all shadow fleets are reporting combat ready," said Commander Lisa Grant, his chief tactical officer. She was young, barely 40, but her eyes held the same determination that burned in every human officer. "The Veil Protocol is fully active. Council sensors show no detection of our positions." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the central display. It showed the entire galaxy, with human territory marked in blue and Council space in red. For 3 centuries, that blue section had remained small, contained. Exactly as the aliens wanted, that was about to change. "Show me the Kathrani main fleet," Daniel ordered. The display shifted to reveal a massive armada gathering near the Arcturus relay point. Over 8,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons. Each one crewed by warriors who believed they were about to crush a helpless enemy. The pride of the Kathroni Dominion, the most feared military force in the known galaxy. They are bringing everything, Lisa observed quietly. They want this to be over quickly. They will get quick, Daniel replied. Just not the kind they are expecting. He turned to face the officers assembled around the command center. These men and women represented the true leadership of Earth's military. People who had trained in secret, who had never appeared on any official roster, who had dedicated their lives to a war they knew was coming. Today we reveal ourselves, Daniel said, his voice carrying easily through the room. Today the galaxy learns what humanity is truly capable of. Signal Admiral Patricia Reeves. She has. NG engagement. Tell her she may begin when ready, in the darkness between stars. In the vast empty spaces where no sensors reached and no ships traveled, something stirred. The Terran Shadow Navy had been built over 2 centuries in locations so remote that light itself took years to reach them. Hidden shipyards carved into rogue asteroids drifting between star systems. Construction facilities buried in the hearts of gas giants where no alien probe could survive. Manufacturing plants on dead worlds in sectors that the Council had declared worthless and forgotten. 50,000 warships powered up their engines simultaneously. Each vessel was equipped with technology that humanity had never revealed. Systems reverse-engineered from ancient ruins discovered deep beneath the surface of Mars. Ruins that predated human civilization by millions of years. Admiral Patricia Reeves stood on the bridge of the carrier Endeavour, watching her fleet come alive around her. She was a small woman with gray-streaked brown hair and calm eyes that had seen 30 years of simulated warfare. Every battle, every scenario, every possible situation had been practiced and perfected. Now, it was time to do it for real. All ships. This is Admiral Reeves, she announced over the fleet-wide channel. 2 centuries of patience ends today. The galaxy wanted to see what humanity could do. Let us show them. The first target was the Kethrani Third Fleet. 600 warships assigned to secure the human colony at Tau Ceti. The Kethrani commander, a veteran warrior named Garath, had positioned his forces in a standard blockade formation. Confident that no human force could challenge him, he was reviewing attack plans in his quarters when the alerts began. Commander, we are detecting unknown vessels emerging from everywhere, his sensor officer reported, voice shaking. Count is. This cannot be right. Count is over 2,000 ships. Goroth rushed to the bridge, his forearms working the controls of his command chair as he settled into place. The tactical display showed his fleet surrounded by human vessels that had somehow appeared without warning. They were sleek and angular, their hulls covered in materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. All ships, raise shields, and prepare to engage, Goroth ordered. They may have surprised us, but our technology is superior. We will destroy them. The Kethrani fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts and missile salvos streaked toward the human vessels. None of them hit. The human ships moved in ways that physics should not allow, sliding between attacks as if they knew where each shot would land before it was fired. And then they returned fire. Beams of pure white light lanced out from the human vessels. They did not splash against Kethrani's shields. They passed through them as if they did not exist, cutting through hull plating and armor like a hot knife through paper in the span of 10 minutes. Every Kethrani ship in the fleet was disabled, not destroyed, but crippled beyond repair. Engines dead, weapons offline, life support barely functioning. Commander Goroth sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that now showed nothing but drifting wreckage where his proud fleet had once been. A human face appeared on his communication screen, a young officer with a pleasant smile. Commander Goroth, this is Captain Samuel Drake of the Terran destroyer Liberty. Your fleet has been neutralized. Medical vessels are on the way to assist with casualties. Please do not attempt repairs or you will be fired upon again. Goroth found his voice with difficulty. How? How is this possible? Your weapons. Your ships. Commander, I suggest you contact High Chancellor Vorith, Drake replied calmly. Tell him that humanity accepts his declaration of war, and tell him this was us being gentle. We would prefer not to kill anyone, but we will if we must. The transmission ended, leaving Gorath alone with the ruins of everything he had believed about human weakness. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy over the next 12 hours. The Vosari assault force found itself ambushed by ships that seemed to step out of empty space itself. Their advanced sensors, the pride of Vosari engineering, detected nothing until human weapons were already tearing their fleet apart. The Melthari Armada, 2,000 vessels carrying the most experienced warriors in the Outer Rim, encountered a single human dreadnought, the mighty battleship Defiance. 3 kilometers long and carrying weapon systems that the galaxy had never imagined. The engagement lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, the Melthari Armada no longer existed as a fighting force. The Defiance continued on its course without a scratch on its hull, back on Europa. Admiral Hayes watched the reports flooding in from every sector. Human losses were minimal, mostly accidents and equipment malfunctions, rather than enemy action. The Council fleets were being systematically dismantled, their ships disabled, their crews left alive but helpless. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "the President is ready for his address." Daniel nodded. The military phase was proceeding perfectly. Now it was time for the political phase to begin, on Earth. President Marcus Webb stepped before cameras that would broadcast his words to every species in the galaxy. He was a calm man with a steady voice and eyes that held no anger, only determination. "For 300 years we have endured," he began. "Today, we stop enduring. Today, we show the galaxy who humanity really is." The universe was about to change forever. High Chancellor Vorath had not slept in 3 days. He sat in his private chambers on the Kathrani homeworld, surrounded by military advisors and government officials who looked just as exhausted and frightened as he felt. Reports continued to arrive every few minutes, and each one was worse than the last. "The 7th Fleet has been neutralized," one general reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Same pattern as the others?" Human ships appeared without warning, disabled every vessel in minutes, then withdrew. They did not pursue escape pods or finish off crippled ships. "Why?" another advisor demanded. "Why are they showing mercy? It makes no tactical sense." Vorath stared at the strategic display on his wall. 3 days ago, it had shown the combined might of 41 species preparing to crush a primitive enemy. Now, it showed chaos. Human fleets moving freely through Council space, striking wherever they wished, destroying shipyards and military installations, but carefully avoiding civilian targets. "They are sending a message," Vorath said quietly. "They want us to know they could kill us all, but they are choosing not to. It is humiliating." A new report arrived, and the officer who read it went pale. "Hi, Chancellor. The human president has just completed a broadcast to all species. He is offering terms." "Terms? They are offering us terms." Vorath laughed bitterly. 3 days ago, we declared war on them. Now, they offer us terms." He ordered the broadcast played on the main screen. President Marcus Webb appeared, sitting behind a simple wooden desk with the flag of the Terran Federation hanging behind him. He looked calm, almost friendly, like a teacher about to explain something to confused students. "To the species of the Galactic Council," Webb began, "I speak to you today not as a conqueror, but as a neighbor who has been forced to defend himself. You declared war on humanity. You plan to occupy our worlds, dismantle our ships, and reduce us to a servant species. We could not allow this." Vorath's claws dug into the arms of his chair as he listened. "Over the past 3 days, our forces have demonstrated that we are not the weak, primitive species you believed us to be. We have disabled or destroyed over 90% of the military vessels that were deployed against us. Your homeworlds are undefended. Your supply lines are broken. Your military leadership is in chaos." Webb paused, his expression softening slightly. "What? We have not attacked your civilian populations. We have not bombarded your cities. We have gone out of our way to minimize loss of life, even among those who sought to destroy us. This is not because we are weak. It is because we choose not to be cruel." On the Kathrani homeworld, advisors exchanged nervous glances. This human spoke the truth. Despite their overwhelming military advantage, the Terran forces had been remarkably restrained. They could have turned Kathrani worlds to ash, Instead, they had merely removed the ability to fight back. "We offer the following terms," Webb continued. "First, the Galactic Council will immediately cease all military operations against human territory. Second, the Council will recognize humanity as a full and equal member, with all rights and privileges that entails. Third, the restricted zones around human space will be permanently abolished. Fourth, any species that wishes to establish peaceful relations with humanity may do so freely, without Council interference." Webb leaned forward slightly, his eyes seeming to look directly at Vorath through the screen. "These terms are not negotiable. You have 72 hours to accept them. If you refuse, or if you attempt further military action against our people, we will no longer show restraint. We will treat your worlds as you plan to treat ours. I sincerely hope it does not come to that." The broadcast ended. Silence filled Vareth's chamber. "It is a bluff," one general said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They cannot sustain this offensive. Their supply lines are too long, their forces to spread out." "Is it a bluff?" Vorath replied coldly. 3 days ago, you told me that human ships could not penetrate our shields. You told me their weapons were primitive. You told me their fleet numbered less than 1,000 vessels." Ijo stirred at the strategic display. "Now we know they have tens of thousands of ships with technology we cannot even understand. What else do we not know?" No one answered. In the depths of space, aboard the flagship Endeavour, Admiral Patricia Reeves was having a very different kind of meeting. She stood before a group of officers who had just completed the most successful military operation in human history. "Current status," she said, looking at her reports. "Council military capacity has been reduced by approximately 93%. Casualties among enemy forces are estimated at under 5,000, mostly from accidents and secondary explosions rather than direct fire. Human casualties stand at 217 all causes." Captain Samuel Drake, who had led the first engagement against the Kathrani Third Fleet, spoke up. "Admiral, some of my officers are asking why we are being so careful. We could have ended this in the first day if we had used full force." "We could have," Patricia agreed. "And we would have killed billions of beings who were just following the orders of their governments. We would have turned humanity into the monster the Council already believed us to be." She shook her head. "That is not who we are. We fight to defend ourselves, not to dominate others." "The Council would not have shown us the same mercy," another officer pointed out. "No, they would not have. And that is exactly why we must be better than them. When this war ends, and it will end soon, we need to live alongside these species. We need to trade with them, cooperate with them, build a future with them. That becomes much harder if we have slaughtered their children and burned their cities." Patricia turned to face the main viewport, where stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Humanity spent 300 years being treated as inferior. "We could use this moment to take revenge, to make them suffer as they made us suffer. But revenge is not strength. Revenge is weakness, dressed up in anger." She looked back at her officers. "True strength is having the power to destroy your enemies and choosing not to. True strength is offering peace to those who wanted war. That is what we will show the galaxy. That is how we will prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars." The officers nodded, understanding spreading across their faces. Back on Earth, President Webb met with his cabinet in the Situation Room beneath the Capitol. The mood was cautiously optimistic, but everyone knew the next 72 hours would determine everything. "You think they will accept?" his defense minister asked. "Some will," Webb replied. "The Arinthians have already sent private messages expressing interest in peace. The Volari are preparing a formal statement of support. But the Kathrani," shook his head. "Vorath built his entire career on the belief that humanity was inferior. Accepting our terms means admitting he was wrong about everything. That is a very hard thing for a proud being to do. And if he refuses," Webb's expression hardened, "then we show him what human restraint really means by removing it. I pray it does not come to that. But I will not sacrifice our people to spare his pride." The clock was ticking. 72 hours to decide the fate of the galaxy. 50 hours after President Webb's ultimatum, High Chancellor Vorath made his choice. It was not the choice his advisors had begged him to make. It was not the choice that reason and logic demanded. It was the choice of a proud being who could not accept that everything he believed had been wrong. "We will not surrender to mammals," he declared before the emergency session of the Kethrani High Command. "We will not bow to creatures who were living in caves when our ancestors built empires among the stars. If we must die, we will die with honor." He ordered every remaining Kethrani vessel to gather at the Arcturus relay point. Every reserve fleet, every patrol ship, every armed transport that could carry a weapon. He sent messages to the other Council species, demanding they contribute their surviving forces to one final, massive assault. Most refused. The Visari had already begun secret negotiations with humanity. The Melthari were in open revolt against their own government, furious that their warriors had been sent to die against an enemy they could not defeat. A dozen smaller species had quietly announced their withdrawal from the Council entirely, but Vorath still managed to assemble a formidable force. 12,000 warships, crewed by beings who would rather die than accept human dominance. They jumped into the Sol system on the morning of the 71st hour. Emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, weapons already powered and ready, what they found waiting for them would haunt Kethrani. Nightmares for generations. Earth floated serenely in the void, a blue and green jewel wrapped in white clouds. Around it, arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of mathematical precision, hung thousands of defensive platforms. Each one radiated more power than a Kethrani battleship. Each one was armed with the same terrifying weapons that had torn Council fleets apart, and behind them, arranged in perfect formation, waited the true Terran Navy, not the shadow fleets that had struck from hidden positions, not the raiding forces that had disabled enemy ships with surgical precision. The full might of human military power, gathered in one place for the first time in history. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the command deck of the orbital fortress Sentinel, looking at the enemy fleet on his tactical display. Beside him, Commander Lisa Grant quietly reported the numbers. 12,247 enemy vessels confirmed, she said. All Kethrani design signatures. No other species represented. Vorath came alone, Daniel observed. The others have abandoned him. He's making a statement. Victory or death? Daniel nodded slowly. He had hoped it would not come to this. Despite everything, he had hoped the Kethrani would choose survival over pride. Open a channel to the enemy fleet, he ordered. The face that appeared on his screen was Vorath himself, standing on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his most loyal officers. The High Chancellor's scales had taken on a grayish tint, a sign of extreme stress in his species, but his yellow eyes burned with defiance. Admiral Hayes, Vorath said, I have come to finish what the Council began. Chancellor, I urge you to reconsider. Your fleet is outmatched in both numbers and technology. If you engage, your people will die. All of them. There is no victory waiting for you here. Perhaps not. But there is honor. Something humans cannot understand. Daniel felt a flash of anger, but controlled it. Chancellor, I have spent 40 years of my life hoping that this war would never happen. I did not want to kill your people. I did not want to destroy your ships. Everything we have done has been designed to minimize casualties, to give you the chance to walk away. We do not walk away, Vorath replied. We are Kethrani. We fight until we win or until we die. Then you have chosen death. And not just for yourself, but for the thousands of beings serving under your command. Beings who trusted you to lead them wisely. For a moment, something flickered in Vorath's eyes. Doubt, perhaps. Or regret. But it passed quickly, replaced by cold determination. Enough talk. Let history record that the Kethrani Dominion did not surrender. He cut the transmission. Daniel turned to Lisa. All units to battle stations. Weapons free. But he paused, wrestling with what he was about to order. Try to disable rather than destroy. Every ship that can be crippled instead of killed represents lives saved. Yes, sir. Though at these numbers, many will die regardless. I know. God help us all. Captain Samuel Drake stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the Kathrani fleet begin its advance. Around him, his crew moved with the calm efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire careers. All weapons charged and ready, his first officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, reported. Shield generators at maximum. Engines standing by. Good. Samuel looked at the enemy ships on his display. Thousands of vessels crewed by living beings who were about to die because their leader was too proud to admit defeat. Remember, we are not here to prove we are stronger. The last 3 days already proved that. We are here to end this as quickly and cleanly as possible. The Kathrani fleet opened fire first. Thousands of missiles and plasma bolts streaked across the void toward the human defensive line. The orbital platforms responded, and beams of white light intercepted the incoming fire, detonating warheads and dispersing plasma clouds. Before they could reach their targets, then the human fleet moved forward. The battle that followed was not really a battle at all. It was a demonstration. Human ships danced between enemy formations, their weapons cutting through shields and armor with terrifying ease. Kathrani vessels exploded or went dark, their systems overloaded by weapons they could not counter. Vorath watched from his flagship as his fleet was systematically destroyed. Ship after ship vanished from his tactical display. Brave captains who had served him for decades died in seconds, their final transmissions cut short by human weapons. "High Chancellor, we must withdraw," one of his officers pleaded. "We can jump to hyperspace, regroup, find another way." "There is no other way," Vorath replied quietly. He watched as a human dreadnought, the massive Defiance, carved through an entire wing of his fleet without slowing down. There was never another way. I was just too blind to see it. The flagship shuddered as enemy fire began striking its shields. Warning alarms screamed throughout the bridge as systems began failing. "Sir, our shields are down to 30%. Engine room reports critical damage. We cannot fight, and we cannot run." Vorath sat down heavily in his command chair. Around him, the bridge was filled with smoke and the cries of wounded officers. The tactical display showed less than 2,000 of his ships still functional, and that number was dropping rapidly. "Open a channel to the human commander," he said finally. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. Admiral Hayes's face appeared on the screen. The human looked tired, but not triumphant. There was no joy in his eyes, only sadness. "Chancellor Vorath, are you ready to discuss terms?" "I am ready to end this," Vorath replied. "My fleet will stand down. My people will accept your conditions. Order your ships to power down their weapons and hold position. Medical vessels will be dispatched to assist with casualties. No further harm will come to your people." Vorath nodded and gave the order. Across the battlefield, Kathrani ships began going silent, their weapons falling dark, their engines powering down. The battle was over. In less than an hour, the most powerful war fleet the Kathrani Dominion had ever assembled had been reduced to drifting. Wreckage, and somewhere on Earth. Ambassador Catherine Cole smiled as she received the news. "Phase 1 complete," she said to the officers around her. "Now the real work begins." 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old Galactic Council was dissolved, its headquarters on Station Nexus Prime abandoned by the species that had once dominated its chambers. In its place, a new organization was forming, built on principles that had never existed in galactic politics: equality, cooperation, and mutual respect. The treaty negotiations had taken weeks. Representatives from over 60 species gathered in a massive station orbiting Earth, a structure that human engineers had constructed in record time as a symbol of the new era. The station was named Unity, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ambassador Catherine Cole walked through the corridors of Unity Station, nodding politely to delegates from a dozen different species. 3 months ago, many of these beings had wanted humanity destroyed. Now they treated her with a respect that bordered on fear. She did not enjoy their fear. That was not what humanity had fought for. The main conference chamber was filled when she arrived. Thousands of seats arranged in a great circle, with delegations from every species that had accepted the new order. At the center stood a podium where the treaty would be signed, and behind it hung the flags of every member world. President Marcus Webb was already there. Speaking quietly with Admiral Daniel Hayes and Admiral Patricia Reeves, they looked up as Catherine approached. "The Kathrani delegation has arrived," she reported. "Former High Chancellor Vorith is with them." Webb nodded slowly. How does he seem? Broken, but also, perhaps relieved? It is difficult to say. His species does not express emotion the way we do. He led his people into a war he could not win, and watched thousands of them die because of his pride. That would break anyone, Webb sighed. Bring him in. It is time. The Kathrani delegation entered the chamber, and a hush fell over the assembled species. Voreth walked at the front, his forearms hanging loosely at his sides, his yellow eyes fixed on the floor. He was no longer High Chancellor. That title had been stripped from him by his own people, who had overthrown his government within days of the battle. Now he was simply Delegate Vorath, a representative like any other. He approached the central podium and stopped before President Webb. For a long moment, the two beings simply looked at each other. The human who had shattered Kathrani pride, and the alien who had tried to destroy humanity. "Delegate Voreth," Webb said formally. "The Terran Federation welcomes the Kathrani Dominion to the Unity Council. We hope this marks the beginning of a new relationship between our peoples." Vorath's voice was quiet when he replied, "President Webb, my people have authorized me to sign the Treaty of Unity on their behalf. We accept all terms. We acknowledge humanity as our equals. He paused, struggling with words that went against everything he had ever believed. "We apologize for the war we declared. It was unjust. It was based on lies we told ourselves about your species." Webb extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. Voreth looked at it for a moment, then reached out with one of his own hands and clasped it. "The past is the past, Delegate. What matters now is the future we build together." Around the chamber, delegates began to applaud. Not all of them, but many. Species that had been enemies for centuries now found themselves united by a common desire to move forward. Catherine took her place at the podium as the formal ceremony began. One by one, representatives from each species came forward to sign the treaty. The Valari signed eagerly, their feathered crests bright with excitement. The Arinthians added their elegant script with obvious relief. Even the Meltheri, who had lost so much in the brief war, pressed their paw prints to the document with something like hope in their small eyes. When the last signature was added, Catherine addressed the assembly. "Some of you are wondering how this happened," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "How a species that has only traveled the stars for 4 centuries could humble empires that have existed now for thousands of years. How humanity, which you dismissed as primitive and weak, could defeat the combined military might of the galaxy." She walked slowly across the floor, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of worlds. "The answer is not our weapons or our ships, though those certainly played their part. The answer is simpler than that. We never forgot what it meant to struggle." She stopped in the center of the chamber, looking up at the assembled species. "While your civilizations grew comfortable and secure, we remembered what it was to be small, to be afraid, to fight for every scrap of progress. We built our strength not in spite of our challenges, but because of them. Every obstacle you placed in our path only made us stronger. Every restriction only made us more determined." Vorath listened with his head bowed. He had underestimated humanity in every possible way. They had seemed so eager to please, so willing to accept their inferior position. He had never imagined it was all a mask. "But strength alone is not enough to build a civilization that lasts," Catherine continued. "Strength without wisdom becomes tyranny. Power without mercy becomes cruelty. That is why we chose to show restraint in our victory. That is why we offered peace instead of demanding surrender." She returned to the human delegations area, where Admiral Hayes and Admiral Reeves stood watching with quiet pride. "We do not want to rule the galaxy. We never did. We want to be part of it, as equals, contributing our strengths while learning from yours. We want to explore the stars together, to solve problems together, to build something greater than any single species could achieve alone." Catherine turned back to face the assembly. One final time, Galactic Council believed that the only way to deal with a rising species was to crush it. Before it became a threat, we believed differently. We believe that the galaxy is big enough for everyone. We believe that cooperation creates more prosperity than competition. We believe that every species, no matter how young or how old, has something valuable to offer. She straightened her uniform and smiled, the same smile she had worn in the old council chamber when the war was declared. Today, we sign a treaty. But a treaty is just words on a page. What matters is what comes after. Will we keep the promises we make here? Will we treat each other with respect and fairness? Will we choose the harder path of building trust instead of the easier path of falling back into old patterns? The chamber was utterly silent. Every being present understood the weight of this moment. Humanity extends its hand in friendship to every species willing to take it. The past does not have to determine the future. We can be better than we were. All of us, together. Catherine stepped back from the podium. President Webb moved forward to add his own signature to the treaty. And when his pen left the paper, a new era officially began. Outside the station, visible through the great windows of the conference chamber, Earth hung in the void, beautiful and blue, and finally free. Human ships patrolled alongside vessels from a dozen other species. No longer enemies, but partners in a galaxy that was learning to be different. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood at one of those windows. Watching the stars he had spent his life protecting, do you think it will last? Lisa Grant asked quietly, standing beside him. Maybe, maybe not. History is full of treaties that were broken and promises that were forgotten. He turned to look at her, and for the first time in years, there was genuine hope in his eyes. But we have to try. That is what humanity does. We keep trying no matter how many times we fail. We keep reaching for something better. The Unity Station turned slowly in its orbit, carrying the hopes of 100 worlds into an uncertain future. Behind them lay 3 centuries of oppression and a war that had changed everything. Ahead lay possibilities that no one could predict. But for the first time in galactic history, those possibilities would be shaped by all species equally, including the small, stubborn, possibly determined mammals from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.